Hey folks, Scott Walters with the Bulletproof Garage, and today we're talking about chainsaws. Specifically, we're going to discuss how many chainsaws you need in your arsenal. So let's get started. All right, our first chainsaw is the 50cc saw. Folks, whether you've got one chainsaw or 50, I think the 50cc saw is the foundation of your saw plan, okay? Why is that? Because it is versatile. You can do just about anything with it. Now, you're probably not dropping a redwood with it, but you can drop a respectable sized tree with this saw, okay? Another thing too, it is not too doggone heavy that you don't want to carry it around all day. And this may be the smallest saw that you have in your arsenal. You may not need to go smaller than this if you've got multiple saws. Now, this particular saw is a Stihl 026 Pro. It was built in 1999 and it's 49 cc's, all right? I lump them in with the 50cc class saws. It wears a 16-inch bar and it's running 325 chain. Now, this saw will handle up to a 20-inch bar with no problem, especially if you're cutting softwood, all right? But I've got another saw that I like to run a 20-inch bar on. So this one lives with a 16-inch bar and 325 chain. Yeah, it'll run 3/8 chain as well, but I think a 50cc saw pulls a little harder with 325 chain. Okay, I've got my scale up here, so let's go ahead and check the dry weight of the saw, okay? So that is without oil and fuel mix. 13.3 pounds, not too bad. Now, a used 026 or an MS260 or 261, which is all basically the same saw, is going to run you on the bottom end about $200, on the high end $300, $350, depending on the age of the saw and your location as well. Saw prices are really location specific. Now, the current version of this saw is the MS261, and those have an MSRP of $720. And that is a pro saw just like this one is. Now, for a homeowner grade saw, the MS271 is a Stihl 50cc saw with an MSRP of $500, all right? So save you about $200 for the homeowner grade. Now, let's talk briefly about homeowner saws versus pro saws. This is a pro saw. As you can see, it's 20 some odd years old, still in pretty good shape. But I tell you what, homeowner saws, there's nothing wrong with them. And if you're not using them day in and day out, they're going to suit your needs. And there used to be a big difference between homeowner grade saws and professional saws, but these days there's not a lot, all right? The pro saws are generally built a little sturdier, they may use more metal and less plastic, and they may have more features like an adjustable oiler or a decompression button. But frankly, you know, a homeowner saw, if well taken care of, is gonna last you decades. All right, folks, if you're still watching, that's because you either need or want another chainsaw, and I'm here to help. All right, we've jumped up to the 70cc class because a lot of you will not need or want a chainsaw smaller than 50 cc's, all right? So the 70cc class, these saws are a lot more powerful, a lot more capable. This particular saw is a Stihl 044, manufactured in 1991, and it is a ripper, all right? It's got a 24-inch bar, and that is a good fit for this saw, and I'm running 3/8 chain on it, which I also prefer for a 70cc saw, all right? This particular saw is actually 71 cc's. Now, this saw can easily run a 28-inch bar, all right? It'll oil it as well. But if you want to run a 32-inch or a 36-inch bar, I don't think this is the saw for you, unless you're just doing it in an emergency, all right, when your big saw is down or you're cutting some softwood, okay? All right, let's check the dry weight on this. Again, we've got no oil or fuel mix in it. All right, I've got 18.7 pounds. Now, a nice used 044 or MS440 or MS441, which are the newer models of this saw, is going to run you about $700. Again, location specific, depending on condition, of course. Now, Stihl doesn't make this particular model anymore, but they make something very similar to it, and that's the MS462. And a new MS462 is going to set you back $1,400. Okay, folks, let's talk about bar length in general. All right, now the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about the size of a chainsaw. The size of a chainsaw, really, in my opinion, this is not a 24-inch saw. This is a 71cc saw, all right, the Stihl 044. But the bar doesn't determine the size because you can swap the bar out. Okay, so the chainsaw manufacturers will let you know what size bar and what chain they recommend for a particular saw. And they're generally pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. Now, what you often find are folks who want to run a really long bar on a really small saw. For example, that 026 Pro, that 50cc saw, there is a 36-inch bar that will bolt up to that, all right? And you could give it a shot, but it's going to be a really frustrating experience. So, okay, folks, the problem with a bar that is too long for the saw is threefold. Number one, all right, if you've got that bar 80% buried in a tree, it does not have the power to pull that much chain sunk in the wood. Number two, that oiler on that saw is designed to oil a particular length of chain. When you have too much bar and chain on it, it's going to run low on oil and you're going to burn your bar. And that's going to wear it out prematurely. Number three, the clutch on your saw is designed to handle a certain length of chain buried in a certain length of hardwood or softwood, all right? When you start overloading the clutch, you're going to tear it up. So that's why you don't run a bar that's too long on a saw that can't handle it. Now, folks, in an emergency, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, right? So when Hurricane Katrina hit my parents' house, I had two saws. I had a 50cc saw and I had a 30cc Homelite, I believe. And I put an 18-inch bar on that 30cc saw, and it was not happy with it, all right? It bogged as soon as I got it sunk into any decent amount of wood, but the saw was worthless to me without that 18-inch bar, all right? So the saw made it. I'm surprised I didn't burn it up. Again, the point of the story is sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Okay, folks. Now we're going to drop down to the 30cc class. I know I just said that most of y'all will not need or want something smaller than the 50cc saw, but let's face it, 99% of us don't need anything bigger than a 70cc saw. So let's drop down to the 30cc and talk about it. Now, this particular saw is a Stihl 020 AV, all right? It's a 32cc saw. This one was manufactured in 1981. It's wearing a 14-inch bar with 3/8-inch Pico chain, but I think it'd be a little bit happier with a 12-inch bar. And again, you can run 3/8 Pico on it. You can run 1/4-inch chain on it, okay? Something like this is going to be handy for really small jobs, all right? You might want to throw it on your four-wheeler or in your UTV to clean up some trails. It doesn't take up a lot of space. You might want to use it for trimming stuff. You might use it for limbing, all right? And again, it's not very heavy. You can walk around with this thing pretty much all day, and it's not going to wear you out. Speaking of weight, let's check that. All right. I've got 10.7 pounds, okay, and again, that is dry weight. Now let's talk about this particular model. The 020 AV, it's not a great saw in my opinion. They are not easy to work on, and I have pulled my hair out trying to keep these things running well. I'm going to go ahead, and I've got two of these rear handle saws. I'm going to sell them both, and I don't think I'm going to replace them with anything. Now, having said that, if you're convinced you want an 020 AV or an AV Super, all right, knock yourself out. You can find them for around $100, $150, $200 for a really, really nice one. All right. But It's not for me. If I wanted a 30cc class saw, I'm probably going to go to the hardware store and pick up a Stihl MS-180. All right, that's a 32cc homeowner saw. Retails for about 260 bucks. You know what? I've run them before. They're capable. And instead of lasting 50 years like a pro saw might, that's probably only going to last you 40 years, okay? Okay, folks, let's talk about chain size real quick, all right? There are exceptions to everything, of course, but I'm going to give you the rule of thumb that I use when determining what size chain to use. Less than 40 cc's, like this little guy right here, I'm going to run either 3/8 inch Pico, which is also called 3/8 inch low profile, or 1/4 inch chain. The next size up, the 40cc class and the 50cc class, I'm going to run 325 chain. All right, on up from there, 60cc class, which I have right here, on up to the 90cc class, I'm going to run 3/8 inch chain. And on the big fellas, 100 cc's and up, I'm going to run 404. Simple enough? Okay, again, there are exceptions to everything, but that is a rule of thumb that I use, and I hope you find it helpful. All right, I see you're still watching, so let me tell you about your next chainsaw, all right? We're going to split the difference between the 50cc class and the 70cc class and come in at 62 cc's with the Stihl 036 Pro, all right? This guy right here. This saw was manufactured in 1994, and man, I love this saw. You could almost get away with this being your smallest saw, all right? Now, this saw handles real well with a 20-inch bar, and that's what I've got on it right now, but it can take up to a 24-inch bar with no problem, and I run 3/8 inch chain on this. Okay, let's check the weight. Okay, 16.6 pounds. Okay, now let's talk about prices, all right? I'm talking specifically about prices for used saws, all right? And they're professional saws, and we're really going to focus on Stihl. This may apply to the other makes of professional saws, but I'm just not terribly familiar, okay? So again, focusing on used Stihl Pro saws. Now, what we have here is a Stihl 036 Pro, all right? 60cc class. And what you need to know first is how much that particular saw costs new. Now, this saw is still made as an MS362, okay? So the newest model of the 036 is the MS, as in Motorsagen, all right, 362. The newest model costs $900 new, all right? That's the MSRP. So what I'm going to do with that MSRP is I'm going to cut it in half, and then I am looking to buy an 036 or an MS361 or an MS362 for about 450 bucks, all right? You take the MSRP, you cut it in half, and that gives you a very rough ballpark. Now, if it is an old beat up 036, you're probably not going to be paying as much as 450, all right? But if it is a MS362 that's been used to cut down one tree, you're probably going to pay more than $450. And again, location is really important when it comes to chainsaw prices, and obviously condition as well, okay? So hope you find that helpful. Okay, folks, now we're talking. All right, this is an 85cc saw. This is the Stihl 064. This particular saw was manufactured in 1991. Now, I lump these in with the 90cc saws because even though it's only 85 cc's, it pulls really hard. It's got a fantastic power to weight ratio. In addition, the later saws in these series, the 066, the MS660, the MS661, etc., are all 92 cc's again. So that's why I'm calling this a 90cc class saw. Now, this particular saw is wearing a 28-inch bar. It handles really well with that length bar, but this is the smallest saw, all right, in the Stihl Pro Saw lineup that I would run full-time with a 36-inch bar, and it can handle that without any trouble. All right, and look, I got you, all right? I know there are folks out there that are running 046 and MS462s and 044s and MS441s and such with a 36-inch bar day in and day out, all right? Maybe you're cutting softwood, maybe you got a modified muffler, all right? You advance the timing, you set the squish at 19 thousandths, whatever, all right? I'm just saying personally for me, if I'm running a 36-inch bar, this is the smallest saw that I'm going to do it with. Now, let's get a weight on this beast. 21.2 pounds. I told you, it's got a great power to weight ratio. I mean, look, this is a 28-inch bar, right? Add a 36-inch bar instead of a 28, it's really not going to add a bunch of weight. And you've got a 22, 23-pound saw with a 36-inch bar that can pull that 36-inch bar, all right? That's really impressive. Well, folks, if you're still watching, you must need a big saw. And now we are in the 100cc class, all right? 100 cc's and up. This particular saw is an icon. It's a Stihl 070, 106cc beast. And what is so cool about these saws, these are the ones that put Stihl on the map in the US way back in 1959. And this particular series of saw, the 1106 series, is actually still in production today. All right, they came out in 59, still in production in 2023. No, you can't buy them in the US anymore because of emission standards, but you can find them elsewhere in the world, and it's the same basic architecture. Now, this really qualifies as a monster saw, right? And I am not pulling this big sucker off the shelf unless I need something that is going to run a 3-foot bar with authority, and this will do it. It has got the torque to run that bar buried in hardwood with no issues, and that's pulling 404 chain. You can still find a used 070 out there. You may want to look on that popular auction site, all right? There's usually a few for sale there, but they are out there and available. But a used one in good condition is going to run you about $1,000. All right. If you want to spend several hundred more, you can find yourself an 090. An 090 is the same series saw, the 1106 series, but it has a 137cc engine instead of the 106cc engine, and it also has a different starter and a better clutch. All right. So this is really king of the hill when it comes to the iconic Stihl monster saws. Okay, let's see if we can get a weight on this sucker. 32.9 pounds, all right? That will wear you out lugging it around all day. Okay, we're going to talk about a few other types of saws right now. The first one is the top handle saw. Folks, pay attention here. The top handle saw is for working in trees, all right? As in, you are in a tree, you are climbing a tree, and you're cutting limbs off the tree before you drop it. It is not designed for work on the ground. They are not as stable because of how you hold it, okay? It doesn't have that long handle back here that helps you stabilize the saw. And look, I have this. I am very, very rarely in a tree, all right? But if I am, I want a top handle saw. Bottom line, folks, working in a tree is best left to a trained professional. I just wanted to let you know that the top handle saw is another one that you may consider, all right? And please don't use this on the ground. Now, this particular saw is a Stihl 020 AV Super, all right? Manufactured probably sometime in the mid-1970s. Weight on it is 11.3 pounds, all right? And these prefer about a 12-inch bar, all right, although it will take up to a 16-inch bar. And this is running 3/8 Pico chain, all right? 1/4 inch as well, works as well. All right, folks, we got ourselves another monster here. This is a Stihl 076 AV, all right? It is a 111cc saw from sometime in the 1970s, okay? These saws are torque monsters, and it's currently wearing a 42-inch bar and 404 chain, and it can pull that without any problem. Now, I'm showing you this saw because I know a lot of you like to mill, or you're thinking about getting into milling, all right? Like taking some slabs off of big logs with an Alaskan mill or something similar. And I think these are good for milling because they're still fairly inexpensive, all right? Used and new parts are still generally available. And again, it's got the torque to pull that long bar. Now, you can mill with a lot smaller saw, okay? But I wouldn't put a 36-inch bar on my 044 and mill with it, because milling is really hard on a saw, all right? You want to make sure that you've got enough power so you don't burn up your power head, and you want to make sure that you've got enough oiler to keep that bar oiled, okay? So I don't mill, but if I did, this would be the saw that I did it with. All right, let's see if I can get this sucker on a scale. I'm getting 31.2 pounds, all right? Doesn't seem too bad for a saw that's wearing a 42-inch bar. All right, folks, let's talk about battery-powered saws. Yeah, I know, not very exciting. This is a Milwaukee. It's got the M18 battery. This is the 9 amp hour battery. You need a larger battery, I think, for something like this. It's wearing a 15-inch bar, and it's handy. You know, look, the beauty of this saw is you don't have to worry about whether it's going to start up or not, right? You don't have to worry about mixing fuel. You don't have to worry about your fuel going bad, all right? You just got to worry about your battery. Two things I'll say about that. One, be loyal to a particular battery, all right? You shouldn't have 5 different flavors of batteries in your garage, all right? That means you've got 5 different chargers. You're searching for the right battery, you know, searching for the right charger. That is a pain, and that's how I used to operate. These days, I'm either Milwaukee M18 for about 80% of what I do, or Milwaukee M12. Hey, DeWalt stuff is good too. There's some other brands that are good too, but I just recommend that you're loyal to one particular battery, all right? And that's why I got the Milwaukee battery-powered chainsaw instead of a Stihl battery-powered chainsaw. The second thing I want to tell you about these, the drawbacks, all right? What if your electricity goes out, all right? If you've got to worry about hurricanes, you've got to worry about tornadoes, you've got to worry about snowstorms, you've got to worry about ice storms, this should not be your only saw. You should have a backup that's going to run when you've got a power outage. Because frankly, what happens if you've got a big tree down in your yard that's blocking you from getting in your house or blocking your driveway and you need to cut it up, all right? Unless you have a generator, you're not going to be charging that battery. All right, folks, that is it for this episode of the Bulletproof Garage. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. Now, before I sign off, I have 3 simple requests for y'all. Request number 1, please hit the like button down there, all right? Doesn't cost you a penny, and it helps out the channel. Request number 2. Poke around a little bit on the channel. I've got several dozen videos up right now, and I guarantee that you're going to find something else that you like. Request number 3. Post up a comment, all right? We went over a lot of information here, and obviously a lot of it is a recommendation, but I really want to hear from y'all. What did you like? What did you dislike? What did I royally screw up? Or maybe what did I get right? And especially the folks who do this for a living, because I don't, all right? But if you do it for a living, I want to hear from you. I got a lot of respect for you and your profession, so let's hear your 2 cents as well. Okay, folks, signing off. We'll see you next time on the Bulletproof Garage.